Pot in My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pot in My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and this week we are joined by Dr. Albert Bramante. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Albert.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, CK. I'm happy to be here.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you. So you're definitely a multi-hyphenate, if you will. So you're a talent agent, you're a performance psychologist,
Yes,
and
I
a
am.
mindset expert.
I sure am. Yeah,
All right. But also on top of that, you are something else as well. Like you're probably many things, but you're also an author of a
Yeah, I
book
wrote my
called
first book. Yeah.
Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. So I have some questions to get us started. So it seems very much focused on performance artist, and it seems like your work surrounds that in general. Were you once also a performance artist?
I did a little bit of acting here and there. That's how I started off. And I was also, in the drama club in high school, and I took some acting classes in college as electives, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the process of it. So it really was an interest of mine. And so when I was in my early to mid 20s, I had decided I was going to try it as an actor in New York. And even though it didn't work out, and it wasn't, I just didn't really have to drive for it, to be quite honest with you. But I really liked being around actors. I really liked being in the company of actors. And just the energy of with creatives on set was absolutely amazing. And so that's where I kind of came to the conclusion I want to work with actors. I don't know what capacity at this time yet, but I'd love to work. So while I was kind of still here and there, I would come on sets, and whether it's do a line here on this indie film or help someone out with a small character on that film, I would meet these actors, and I would during the downtime I would try to find. I found myself looking for roles for them, not for me, but for other people, and that gave me so much enjoyment. And I had couple of actors tell me, I said, "Oh, I wish they told me that they wished I could be their agent." And so at that time, the wheels started turning, in my brain. I'm like, this may be a great idea. So now some time had passed, and I started volunteering at film festivals. So I still wanted to keep myself immersed in the industry. Obviously, it's not as an actor. So I started volunteering at film festivals. Like Tribeca, I did 2 years when it first started in after 9/11. And then I did a couple other local festivals in New York City, and I really enjoyed the process. So, and I was organizing a lot of times the panels for actors and creatives and networking parties I was organizing. And I just enjoyed it because for me, what gives me the greatest joy is connecting people, being a connector. And that was something that really solidified my role as an agent, because that's what I do now is I connect actors to roles, I connect actors to production companies, and it was something that's been always ingrained into me. It's just being a connector overall.
I
And
like.
so that's really how it started. I was wearing different hats because right when I was starting my company, I was also hired to be an adjunct instructor at the community college. I decided at this point I was going to go back and get a PhD. I already had my master's in psychology, but my first goal in life was to be a clinical psychologist. Like when I was in high school and then even in college, that was like my laser focus. Is I was going to become a clinical psychologist. I was going to become a research faculty member. I had no interest. I had no knowledge or clue that show business was going to be in my future at that moment. because I was so determined into becoming a psychologist, a research psychologist, a clinical psychologist. And while, when I started my agency, it became a time towards like, I'm just going to go for my PhD. I'm halfway there. When I was a child, I wanted to be a doctor, and I made a promise to my grandmother I was going to become a doctor. I was the first in my family to go to college, so I decided, at that moment when I was a kid, I was going to be a doctor. Now, of course, when I went to high school, I realized if that was going to happen, I'd have to do a lot of intense science and math, which was not something I really wanted to do. So I figured, well, the next best thing is to have a PhD because at least at that point I could still have the doctor title.
Hmm.
Yeah, obviously I'm not a medical doctor, but I can have the doctor title. And when I was starting my agency, I wasn't entirely sure that this was going to be a short thing. So I wanted to just get my PhD, A, to fulfill the promise to my grandmother, B, for my own fulfillment. I'm halfway there. That was always my goal to have a PhD. And just have a fallback plan because the agency didn't work out. So I enrolled in a PhD program. So I was juggling three things in the beginning: teaching, doctoral studies, and building a company. So my time was very limited, as far as like downtime. And so I started my coursework, and while I was building my agency, one problem that kept coming up was self-sabotage in actors. And so and it was like something that was really bothering me or concerning me was because a lot of actors self-sabotaging. At the same time, some of the students were self-sabotaging that I was working with at the community college level. So it was like a major problem overall, but I wanted to really focus on actors. So when it came time to start brainstorming ideas for my doctoral thesis, that's where I said, well, this could be a great fit. And I brought it up to my advisor and say, I have this idea. Can I look at actors and self-sabotage? Because I don't really see anything in the literature on that. And like, this is a great idea. So my doctoral dissertation was self-defeating behavior of performing artists, which is the foundation of Rise Above the Script to some level.
That's fascinating, really, if you think about it. So, yeah, so you were on the scene in New York City. Were you just film or were you film and theater? I think you said
Well,
play.
as an agent, I cover all areas: film, TV, theater, commercial, print, and voiceover. As an actor, I was mainly just doing film.
Okay.
And a little bit of commercials. I really wasn't into theater, which really was, if you wanted to almost call myself out, would have been self-defeating because in order to really thrive as an actor in New York, theater should be on your priority list, and that's something right that I really ask of my clients to at least be active in some theater work, even if their end goal is film and television. But as an actor, I was just filming maybe some commercials. I did rarely any TV because there was not much TV happening at that time when I was doing this, what it is compared to now, 20 something years later. That was my area of focus. But my agency, we cater to all areas. We have clients that are booking commercials regularly. We have clients that are booking theater regularly. And we also have clients that are booking films and TV. So it really runs a whole gamut across the board.
And I know that in the US you have to have a license you have to be a licensed talent agent, right?
Yes. So at least in New York, and maybe different in every state, but at least in the New York, and I was also licensed in New Jersey, we have to get what we call an employment agency license, which means even though I don't really consider myself an employment agent, but at the end of the day, that's what I really am according under the government classification because I'm finding work. So in order to find work for on someone else's behalf, you have to be like a licensed employment agent. So that was the first thing you have to do if someone's looking to become an agent, at least in the Northeast, is to become a licensed agent, which means employment agent. And then, there's a special class under that, which would then be talent, theatrical and talent. So that's where I had to come into. And it's not that lengthy of a process. You do have to get like some background checks and have nothing outstanding, criminally or liability wise, if you can do that, mostly anybody can become a licensed agent, and then you just have to put up like a bond and insurance and all that, just because in case anything happens. So
Yes.
and also just I have to register myself as an LLC, which is I think recommended for anybody doing business is create an LLC or some type of whether it's a DBA or a corporation, but you should do something separate than just yourself as a person. So I registered myself as an LLC, and I always done that, in any company or any agency I was a part of. I've always, set up as an LLC, limited liability company.
So, what is the name of your agency?
Right now, well, the name that I've been using for the past year and a half is Bramante Artist. So when I first started from 2004 and really up until the pandemic in 2020, my company was Emerging Talent. That was what it was called, and it's a good name, served me well. And then I had merged, did an attempted partnership with another agency, and who was Bonafide Artists, and then we merged both companies together, so we became Bonafide and Emerging Artists to kind of combine both of our brands together. And then during the strikes, the writer's strike, and the Screen Actors Guild strike in 2023, we just realized it wasn't working. The partnership wasn't working out on both our ends. So I decided, I'm gonna rebrand. I've always kind of was playing with the idea before I did the merger about changing the name to Bramante Artists, or at least something with Bramante with my namesake, because most agencies do that. Most agents have their name in the title of their company. So, and I wanted to move away from the emerging label because a lot of my clients are seasoned actors; they're not new faces. So right now it's Bramante Artists. I've been, that company's in existence for the past 18 months, since January 1st of 2024. And, I kind of rebranded to myself because I really consider myself as career architects, where we help design. So one of the things that we do with all of our clients, I mean, in addition to finding them work, which is primarily what an agent does, but I also we kind of strategize and partner up with the actors we work with. So after the onboarding, all the paperwork is signed. We then schedule with all of our clients a strategy session. And in the strategy session, we kind of go over the profiles of the actor, their materials are is their demo reels up to date, is their headshots and their marketing materials, and then we kind of come up with a game plan that both of us can see because our because what's important for an agent actor or agent client relationship is synergy, synchronicity. Are we on the same page? Because that's important. I mean, so it's kind of like what we talked about. What types of roles they want to go out for, what I think they're right for, and what they think they're right for. And then we do a game plan, and then we check in every couple of months and see how things are going. Have our own meeting and that. So, but my day-to-day job really is primarily just finding work for actors and trying, and then once we get the work, negotiating contracts.
Mm. And I would imagine so after 20 years, you now have some form of brand within the industry where you're not having to knock on everyone's doors all day, every day, and you do have some people
Yeah,
who,
I mean, most casting directors, at least in New York, know me and know my, brand, and a lot of them I can now email and kind of on a first name basis and all of that, whereas I didn't know anybody 15, 20 years ago. So I still pitch, because the important thing about being an agent is to also be a bit proactive because it is such a saturated, overcrowded space, at least in New York or even LA. So it's because it's such a overcrowded, saturated space. There's so many other agents pitching their clients. So I also want to try to go the extra mile. I don't do that with everything. I'm not going to sit there every day and be on the phone with the same casting director with the same actor. But if I feel like really compelling, like there's a role that the actor is very strongly suited for, I will do go the extra mile and pitch, and I think that's so important for
Mm.
talent representatives to do is to go that extra mile and pitch.
Like that. That's very interesting. And I guess, yes, I would imagine that it's as saturated as the actor pool.
It sure is. I mean, it's small, but it's still saturated. Maybe 100 to 200 agencies and talent reps in the New York area submitting their clients for every given role. So as a casting director, if you were casting a project, you would be getting, depending on the type of project, if it was like a full-on studio budget movie or TV show episode, you're going to be getting anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 actors per role. Now, there's no way possible that you can see or audition or watch so many auditions of these. So typically, only 2 or 3% of that entire pool is going to get invited to audition. Most casting directors that I know have systems and workflows attached where they can view those 1 to 4,000 submissions in less than an hour to choose which they want to audition. Because first thing they look is a headshot. Does the headshot look like somebody is a headshot compelling? Then they're going to click on the resume, and then they may click on the actor's demo, and then all of that combined, if it makes it to that area and they're impressed, they will then invite the actor to audition. But typically, it's like 2 to 3%, and 3% is more on the generous number. Usually, it can anywhere between 1 or 2% that get invited to actually audition for that role. So it's very competitive, very saturated, which really, for us, that which really requires that we have our talent be in tip-top shape so that we can be a part of that larger pool. That small pool, instead of just being drowned out in a larger pool or just, okay, we're just going to throw, these submissions aside. Because
Well,
the way agents work, at least the legitimate agents out there, we only get paid when the actor is paid. So if the actor doesn't get hired, I'm not getting paid, and I have overhead. I have a lot of overhead to account for. This is what, and unfortunately, I mean, well, fortunately, unfortunately, this is the reason why most agents are very selective and not going to accept anybody, because we only have very small amounts of time, very slim and far and few between to go at bat, and we want to make sure we're sending our best player up there.
that makes sense to me. And it also makes sense now to how you mentioned earlier that like you'd have a strategy meeting, make sure you're both on the same page, and that you'd invest in those conversations or those exercises to ensure that you're getting the quality when you're submitting to a casting director. So
Hmm.
that it's definitely a lot of reciprocity, if you will, in that kind of relationship where they show up and they do the job and all of that sort of thing, but there's so much that goes into it before they even get to set, if you will. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the inspiration for your book and some of the things that you do for performance psychology. We'll be right back,
Excellent.
everybody.
Partner today with CK Sims and Pod in My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we have been talking to Dr. Albert Bramante of Bramante Talent, multi-hyphenate, talent agent, performance psychologist, and mindset expert, and last but not least, and I'm sure there's so many more in there as well, author of The Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. So we talked briefly in the beginning about, what that draw was um, to work with the performance artist. And I find that really fascinating too. Like, just, you enjoyed being around them and being sort of in the scene. And so you just knew you wanted to work with them, going and getting your PhD, doing your dissertation. Like, it was all sort of very like, I almost want to kind of say fateful a little bit. Like, seemed like the
Yeah,
cards fell in place.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm someone who always, big believer in fate and destiny on some level. And it is amazing how a lot of things just fell together in a sense, and how both my worlds were able to combine nicely for my book as well as my dissertation, the world of psychology and mindset, as well as my work with actors. So it was amazing just how the two just kind of floats together because they are completely different, fields. But I was able to
Mm.
kind of integrate them in a nice way.
Well, and I don't have a PhD, but I do have clinical psychology training, right? So I have a background. And I don't do that, but I
Mhm.
use the tools and all of that in the work that I do as a consultant, especially when
I would have to say the same because I that was my intention. Like, but when it came down time to do finishing up the degree, there was the internship and the practicum. Now, at that time, I was also teaching and running a company. I really didn't have the time to do an internship, to do a practicum that was, three, because it has to be, the practicum was like 500 hours and the internship was 2,000 hours, which is a year and a half to 2 years practically to,
yeah.
and I didn't really have that time. Plus, to be quite honest with you, my interest in clinical psychology was starting to dwindle a bit.
Mhm.
Um, more about, and I became more of interested in like positive psychology and coaching because for me, the reason, and this only, I can only speak for myself, what was not starting to work for me in clinical psychology was the focus on pathology. And I felt like there needs to be an upside to it. We're kind of just labeling people as being deficient in certain areas. And also, I was noticing a lot of people that were in treatment for, and some of these were extreme psychiatric or personality disorders and disturbances. But what I was noticing is a lot of people are in treatment with no sign of progress or no signs of breakthroughs. And most people do not have the luxury of spending years in therapy, at least even financially. And most insurance companies are not going to pay for someone to go for years of therapy. So that's why I kind of went more into the coaching consulting, component of it because it's much faster. And we don't have the parameters now. I do use a lot of, just like you, I do use a lot of the tools, but I don't call myself a clinical psychologist. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I consider myself more of an educational and performance psychologist. I do have a PhD, but I'm not licensed to diagnose or treat anybody. And to
Of
be
course.
quite frank with you, I have really no desire at this point to do that, to become
Well,
it.
the topic that you were just sort of on about, like the pathology and the restraints and all of those things with, you know, clients and they're not making progress and all that. We could have a whole series of podcasts just on that topic, right? Like that,
Oh
like
yeah.
we could get on a whole rabbit hole on that topic. You had mentioned that you are a recovering people pleaser,
I
right? Not
sure
Michelle.
am.
You put this in your form, and that you've dealt with depression in your life. Did
Hmm.
you find that going through school, all the different stages of school when it came to like clinical psychology or just psychology in general, that it either exasperated or aided you in combating your own mental
I
health?
think I think it helped a little bit, but again, it didn't give me the answers I was looking for. And I would have to say what really kind of helped me experience a breakthrough was hitting brick walls and kind of in that area, hitting rock bottom, not in a dramatic sense, but losing my tenure track assistant professor position. Um, Another partnership that not necessarily a formal partnership, but there was a situation where I had a very toxic work relationship with a someone I was, had employed in my other agencies years ago. It was kind of a combination of both where I was like, this isn't working for me anymore. And I think just the innate wisdom that I got from these experiences or attained from these experiences, I've got to start setting more boundaries in my life. I'm not going to get too much into the rabbit hole here, but I grew up in a household where there was no boundaries, very little boundaries. I had none myself, not only with other people, but even for myself. I had no concept of what it was like to set a boundary because
Yeah.
I grew up in a house that didn't have that. So it was, I was to the point where I was just like, I was a yes man. I would do anything they asked me. And now, of course, after I did a lot of research on this later on, and this is where my kind of psychology background helped. Later on, I we know, and I've learned, from reading this and actually experiencing this, is that people pleasing does not equal people liking you or respecting you. As a matter of fact, it will backfire tremendously. So, in 2008, I was hired as a tenure track assistant professor at community college. This is another reason why I decided to give the clinical psychology up because this time I had no time for an internship practicum unless I wanted to give that up. So I was in my early 30s, and I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. I'm set for life. Because I was doing very well teaching. I was winning awards. I was getting so many positive student evaluations, peer evaluations from fellow professors. This is going to be great. I'm going to be here forever. But I was always the type of person who asked me to do something. I said yes. Didn't even flinch. Yes. Need to take extra classes? Yes. Because they had a shortage of professors. So they always asked me, and I always volunteered to say yes. Until I had another faculty coming up to me and say, you don't have to say yes. I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm going to make, in my head, I'm going to make the bosses happy. Make the administration happy. They're going to love me. And so now I was teaching almost twice the full-time teaching load. I was involved in so many committees that I just really became in the middle of this burnt out
Mhm.
physically, emotionally, mentally done. I was exhausted. And then we had a change in administration in the middle of the whole experience. A whole new people I didn't even know took over the college and the our direct supervisors. So they announced that we're doing budget cuts. They announced to each department, you need to cut at least two people full time for your department. Well, I think you know where I'm going, where that got me. I was on that list. So I got a notification I'm not getting tenure, which is like a huge blow. I'm now looking back in hindsight, it was the best thing that could ever have happened to me. But I didn't
Yeah.
know that at the time. I was devastated because I was like, I did everything they wanted me to do. And that was, I think, the problem. I did everything they wanted to do. So it didn't work. It didn't, so that was, I think, the biggest wake up call now was like, okay, this didn't work. And then going back to the part with the person I was in, it was like an abusive we were together, it wasn't romantic, it was a work thing, but it was an abusive relationship by the time. So struggling with my people pleasing thing, I had a bit of also codependency issues where I started looking at this person that was just help, really, I had just to answer phones for me, but it became a much more enmeshed thing that I even got scared of how involved I was getting and how emotionally needy I was for this person's approval. The more that I wanted the approval, the more this person was pulling away. And then it got the harder I tried. And it wasn't until that blew up that I said, whoa, this is bad. This is really bad. So I need to make some changes. And of course, I think the wisdom is the more older you become. Now, in my late 40s, I'm like, I don't care anymore about, pleasing other people. I'm doing me. And, 30 years ago when I was graduating high school, I wish I knew, had this knowledge now. It would have made my whole experiences a lot easier. And I know everybody says that, but that's the truth.
If there's one piece of advice that I could give teenagers and young adults, is that we only have a finite number of yeses. Choose wisely. Actually, I'm going to make that two. So I too have been a people pleaser. I have found such great strength in simply saying no, period, like full sentence. The explanation is not required. That's a part of the people pleasing, right? Is when we're like, no, I can't, I'm sorry, but I really just blah, 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 blah. No, that part doesn't matter. It's just no, I
Yeah.
can't. That's it, right? But when you give a yes, you can't resent it later. And that was a lesson I had to learn. But they go so well together because just like you had said, you were working like twice the amount of a full-time professor, always saying yes. So you help them every way possible, right? To your detriment. And that's always the case. It's always to the individual's detriment. And
Hmm.
then you end up losing your tenure track position. So if that's something I could give to the young ones to say, listen, I'm like, you don't need to wait till you're 35, 40, I'm 44 to figure out. Just remember, your number of yeses are finite. And if you give a yes, don't resent it later.
Yeah, of course. And that's a good point because resentment does come up a lot with people pleasers because then you start to say, well, no one's respecting me, and I'm giving all this. And then, we have to wonder, are we then responding passive aggressive too to other people without even realizing we're doing it
Mhm.
because we have the resentment coming up. And also, I would even go a step further, which is great advice what you gave, is not to apologize for saying no. Because a lot of people are like, I'm sorry, but no, no, don't apologize. No. And I've said to people, like, this doesn't work for me. Thank you for thinking of me. Or I'll come up with an alternative thing. Well, maybe, if I can't do this myself, I can maybe on another day when I'm working, come and help you find someone who can do that for you.
Mhm.
So I'm not just like saying no, but I'm not, because I think if you start saying I'm sorry, but no, you're kind of leaving the door open for them to say, come back in and say, but come on, I need you, and I need this. And then if you don't have that foundation, you're gonna fold. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And
Yeah, you have to, and it's practice. Because the first time a people pleaser says no, it's going to feel like your roof just blew off and your foundation's crumbling. Because like now what? They're gonna think I'm awful or whatever. This all of the negative
Mhm.
dialogue that's going through your mind. But with practice, just saying no. And if you actually want to help that person, but you don't want to help them right now, that's a boundary paired with your no. So you can say no for today, but I might have time or I do have time next week. This is what will work for me. And if they want to take that condition, that boundary with you, they're going to take it. If they don't, that's their decision, right?
Yeah.
You've given what you can give. So I'm mindful of time. So I really want to get into, so you 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 hit sort of your rock bottom. You lost your tenure track after giving them 150% plus.
Mhm.
What changed? What shifted at that point for you?
I think it was just exhaustion. I think I was like,
Mhm.
I'm tired of being hurt. I'm tired of being this. Because at that same time, that other situation, that thing blew up in my face with that person I was really trying to please and being codependent on that blew up in my face. I was like, something's got to change because this isn't working. And now I'm teaching part time, and the way I do this now is I do the bare minimum. I will follow the requirements of what's required to be an adjunct professor. I will service the department as much as needed in the capacity of my role, but I don't take on extra committee work. I don't I go in, I teach my class, and I leave. And I even set boundaries for my students. When I first started teaching, I was giving my cell phone number out to students. Call me anytime, and now I just give my my work email address out. You need me, email me, and I'll get back to you within 48 hours. And it hasn't changed. The state, I'm still getting stuff, really good evaluations that I was getting at the college. What changed is I set boundaries, and this is what I tell people. Like, now, people are going to get really upset at you setting a boundary. Is that somebody you really want to be continuing to be associated with? Because they're not going to respect your time. Because
Yeah.
even I make requests to people and they say no, I'm not going, and I don't get offended. So okay, got it.
Well, a person should know what their limitations are and what they are okay with and what they're not okay with. It takes some reflection. What's interesting, and I have a goldfish brain, and I just had a comment to make, and it literally swam right out of my head.
Mhm.
It's gone. Darn it. I hate when that happens. We were just talking about, you were just explaining, oh, I'm not going to waste time trying to get it back because I want
Mhm.
to move to your book. So now, if it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. Um, Now, as a talent agent business, you are working as a performance psychologist, if you will, where you're helping people rise above the script. See what I did there?
Okay, I appreciate
So,
that. Yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about the book. What was the catalyst? What was the moment where you were like, I'm going to write a book?
Well, when I was doing my doctoral dissertation, because I was born out of necessity. Well, I had to do a project, but it was just something I just really wanted to understand what was going on in these actors' mind that was causing them self-sabotage a lot. What I mean by self-sabotage, missing appointments, showing up late, dodging appointments, not showing up for auditions. And this is happening not just to me, but other people in the industry too. It was noticing this trend. And I couldn't just figure out why. Why was this happening? At least to me or to other people. So I think first it was born out of necessity. Then when I received my PhD, advisors who, like my dissertation chair and advisor, had told me that this is something new you should publish. This is groundbreaking. And I kind of put it off the back burner for several years. And then one day I said, I really want to write. I should write a book. This could be my legacy. Could that because the books are kind of evergreen in the sense that they're there forever. So,
Yes.
but then I kind of just, again, the task of writing another book. I mean, I did a dissertation. I was like, I'm done. So, but so I had a perfection and procrastination issue. And then now this may work for some authors, it didn't work for me. I made the mistake of hiring a ghostwriter for the first time around. And they sent me a draft, and I realized how this was such a really bad idea. Because I'm reading the draft, and this is way before even Rise of the Script was conceptual, it's the draft of the book. I'm like, this person who wrote the book, who ghostwrote the book, has no knowledge about actors. I cannot put my name on this and be taken
Mhm.
seriously. So that was a bit of a letdown because it was a little bit of money I spent. But then I kind of realized, look, if this book is going to be written, it has to be written by me. Now, maybe ghostwriters can work in the fiction world. I don't think they can work in nonfiction environment unless that person is a subject matter expert, who's writing the book. Because clearly the person who initially wrote mine as a ghostwriter had no idea anything about psychology or about actors. So it was back to square one. I threw the whole thing out. So one thing that really kind of was a wake up call to me was hearing statistics saying that only 1% of people who say they're going to write a book actually do. 99% of people who say they want to write a book never do. So I was like, okay, nope, I'm going to be that 1%. And then also what kind of helped in the process of writing the book was two things. Number one, I already had the foundation because that was my doctoral dissertation. So I just kind of followed the outline for that. And
Mhm.
two, another thing that one of my mentors in the self publishing program I was in had written 15 books, already published, and told me that the best thing that he's done was to just write without self-editing, just write first, like do kind of like a brain dump. And I tell you, that was a game changer. So I started blocking out time of 90 minutes to 120 minutes a day, and I just started writing without editing first until I had a full manuscript, because you're not going to discard that, whereas you can discard a couple of paragraphs. So, and then I just, I did some basic self-editing, and then I said, I'm going to go to a professional, and I had two different editors who were professional editors who didn't know my work or anything like that to kind of give me full, honest, brutal, but helpful critiques, because I had both content and, developmental, which is content related, as well as copywriting, editing, grammar and usage and all that. So it was a little bit of a down. I don't want to say a little humbling experience to get after 2 weeks to get your manuscript returned with every page having red markup on it. But yeah, at first I was like, well, no, they didn't like it. Then when I read the page, I'm like, this is so helpful. So I spent about 2 weeks each time, each round. It took me about 2 weeks just to kind of go through page by page and change. And then before you knew it, I had a manuscript that was polished and ready to go. The changes were absolutely amazing. Most of them were really helpful. And then I was getting a cover art designs and then into formatting. And before you know it, I was uploading in a KDP and I had a book in my hand. And it was
Love it.
surreal. It was surreal to be actually, because I was always a reader. I read a lot of books, I still read a lot. And it was surreal to actually hold a paperback in my hand with my name as the author.
So what you just said, I'm aware of it. I've heard of it. I've met people who have been able to sit down and write without self-editing. I have not been able to achieve that myself. I have written 2 books. One is no longer in circulation because I got in my head. And I want to re-release because I need it to be properly illustrated. The other book is, I always get confused when I'm on this camera. This one right here, the red one. You can see the red one there.
Okay.
So it's Life in Stitches. It's about a young girl from Newfoundland. She was a preacher's kid. There's a lot of correlations with my own life because I was a preacher's kid, going off to New York City to own the fashion runways, and it's the story that spans over 4 years of her going to the fashion school there, all of those particular things. So one thing I always say is that I'm not a writer, I'm a storyteller. I can tell great stories, but writing is not my greatest strength. I'm very proud of this one here. Could it be better? Absolutely, without question. But so I want to do that because my third book, I got stuck and I'm third way through, but I'm going to get it finished. But anyway, it's not about me. This is about you. But it made me the self-editing thing. I need to do something like that, like set aside time and just sit down and write. But it's like I get so in my head. But okay, so The Rise Above the Script, based off of your thesis, you got the book in your hand. I remember that feeling. It's like nothing in this world. There's like, you know what I mean? Like it's a labor of love that is now
Yes.
tangible. So, and it's geared towards anyone in the performing arts specifically.
Yes.
So now, a question for you though: would anybody find the
Yes.
book relatable?
Anybody can. Everybody can, and anybody who deals with self-sabotage or fear of success or putting yourself out there. So even though I wrote the book with the intention of performing artists and actors, there's a lot of wealth of information. There's some stuff I put in there which is general, like techniques to raise self-esteem, techniques to boost your discipline, boost your open-mindedness, creativity. So
And is it just on Amazon?
yes, right now it's on Amazon, but I have a book, an ebook and audiobook. Now it's on Spotify and Google Books as far as audiobooks is concerned.
Awesome. I'll mention something to you after we're done here. But so for anybody who actually wants, because when you talk about self-sabotage, it really like this is like a whole series of podcast again, right? Like my own story, probably your own story. It always resonates with me because I spent 35 years self-sabotaging. like ever,
Yeah.
right? And it took a massive life event for me to start switching things around. And I am a very prime example of somebody who got over the fear, right? Because this is part of why we self-sabotage: the fear of success, the fear of failure, the fear of just putting yourself out there. Me being and doing the show is a prime example of that in motion, because there was a time not more than 2 years ago, you'd never catch me talking on the internet ever. I hated the sound of my voice. I was like, why do I sound so gay? Why do I act so gay? Like all of these
Yeah.
self-deprecating thoughts. And now I'm just like, okay, you get used to it, right? The same if we go back to talking about setting boundaries and saying no and stop being a people pleaser. It takes practice and getting used to stretching that muscle really and growing it. So for everybody at home, get out and purchase an ebook, paperback, and did you say audiobook as well?
Yes, audiobook as well.
And did you do the
No, I actually.
Okay, I had a guest not too long ago who works with people like yourself who write nonfiction books to help them actually record it in their own voice. And I think that that's fascinating. So you can get it in ebook, paperback, or audiobook through amazon.com.ca. I'm assuming it's around the world,
Yes.
anywhere Amazon is. Get out there. Let's support Dr. Bramante. I have a follow-up question to what we were talking about your agency in the first segment. You have to be particular about who you represent as an
Right.
agent.
Mm-hmm.
But how, if somebody wanted to be represented, how would they go about getting in contact? Are you open to that? Or
Yeah, I mean, what you could do is go to my website, bramanteartist.com, and there's a form on the website where you can fill out if you're seeking representation, and you just submit all your information, your links, your videos, and we'll take a look.
I see it. I like it. I like the
Yeah.
splash of color. And then also, just for everybody else, you're on all the social media, so you can. I'm going to link everything in the description. But Linktree/Albert Bramante is
Yes.
will get you to, like, the book, your website, your Facebook, Instagram, all of those particular things.
Yes.
So, what's next for you, my friends?
Well, what's next for me is we're going to be working on more books, down the line. I'm kind of conceptualizing, outlining a couple of non-fiction books. They're going to be on different topics, but within the psychology and coaching space. So one of them is going to be actually about, and in a sense, recovering people pleaser, but more about the martyr theme, like not being a martyr. Because for me, my childhood, and even now, is in sometimes I've always took on the martyr role. Where I was like, I'm not. I'm gonna almost act like I'm punishing myself at some level. Where it's like, so I'm gonna talk about, I want to write a book on that, and that's my thing that I'm working on, like breaking the martyr chains, in a sense, the chains that holds us back. In a
That
sense.
sounds. I would. It sounds like I would read that. Well, we are at time. I want to thank you very much for being a guest on the show.
Mm-hmm.
It was a treat talking with you. I feel like we could have spent hours having a conversation. You have that personability about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
To everyone at home, thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, get out there and live your wildest dreams.
Thank you.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.